Now, one of your books that we've got here always interests me. I've got a copy, the Vedic Prophecies. And you're going to do a reprint of this and do a little...
Yeah, I've been doing some extra study and extra research, and so that I'm gathering more and more information to put in a new version of the Vedic Prophecies, which will probably, maybe in another 2 years will come out.
And pretty profound stuff, predicting what's going on in our world today.
Yeah, you can see it. It's interesting because the Vedic prophecies don't necessarily give a time frame for certain things that'll happen, because each thing that happens, whether it's droughts or evil rulership or things like that, it's all based on man's consciousness. Mankind does have a level of free will. They can adjust their future according to their level of consciousness that they want to enter into.
Wow.
The faster the consciousness becomes degraded, then the worse the scenario becomes, or the sooner these unfortunate reversals in life or in the predictions will manifest. So it's no set time frame. Man can carve its own destiny, so to speak, but there's certain tendencies which are bound to happen within the next 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years that are predicted. Now, how that happens or how that unfolds is basically up to us.
Wow.
So it doesn't say that in the 21st century this is going to happen,
right,
or that's going to happen, which is where a lot of psychics go wrong. Even Nostradamus, he's been correct on many different avenues, but the further out he goes, the less the accuracy has been shown to take place.
Yeah.
So similarly, mankind can adjust his future according to the level of consciousness. In other words, the higher the consciousness, the higher the level of living, and the less reversals or the less problems will come up in life. Whereas if he gets too degraded, then obviously whatever could have happened 50 years ago is going to happen 5 years from now.
This really correlates with what we were talking to with Chip in his book.
Mm-hmm.
That, we have a certain kind of blueprint, really, for our lives, but within that, you have this free will and this ability to take even negative situations and turn them around.
Right.
And I think, like you're saying, the key word is consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, don't you explain that consciousness is actually what we call the soul?
No. Consciousness is what pervades the... Consciousness is like the area where we live. You have the mental aspect, you have the intellectual aspect, but the aggregate level of all that is the consciousness. Consciousness is the thinking, feeling, and willing of a person.
Yeah.
That kind of like pervades the soul, or enwraps the soul. The soul is still separate from all that.
Yeah.
Your consciousness may be completely materialistic. Well, that's because of your aggregate level of thinking, feeling, and willing, and actions.
Yeah.
The soul is still separate from that.
Yeah.
So if you spiritualize your consciousness, then actually that's when you become more and more united in your spiritual perception. How you can see the soul, how you can perceive the soul, and live as the soul.
Yeah.
So it also depends on, what level of consciousness you want to exist in.
So, like in your books, you're explaining that the yoga process itself, different processes of yoga purify the consciousness.
Exactly. That's what it's for, really.
Yeah.
So you can get the spiritual perception. The more spiritual you become, the more spiritual your consciousness becomes, in other words, the more you can perceive that which is spiritual.
Yeah. Which is the reality.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I know in your books many times you've described that what we call the reality is actually, because it's a temporary reality, it's not really the ultimate reality.
It's kind of like a hologram. It's here, but if you really dissect it, these bodies are here, but if you really dissect it, it's just a bunch of atoms. Wow. That have been combined in certain ways. So that's the ultimate reality. But in the meantime, I appear as Stephen Knapp, or I'm like this, or I'm like that. But when it all comes down to the basic element, we're all a bunch of atoms, really.
So I want to thank you for joining us on the show again. We're showing your website. You've got a vast
it's
amount
a
of
big
books.
Website, a lot of information for anybody that's interested. So.
And it's non-sectarian, so whatever group you belong to, you can have a good time on that website there. I want to thank you again, Stephen, for joining us. We also want to thank our other guest, Chip St. Clair, and his fabulous new book, The Butterfly Garden. Again, Stephen's written 20-odd books, so do go to his website. We also want to thank you for joining us on Out of the Ordinary into the Extraordinary. And as always, don't forget, God is alive. Magic is afoot.